In today's video, I'm going to give you 7 reasons to pick the Panasonic S9 over the original Panasonic S5 Mark II. Halfway through this video, we're going to turn the tables and talk about why you should get the S5 Mark II over this guy. Both of these cameras are very similar in many ways, but there's some deal makers or breakers which we're going to talk about in this video. And depending on your particular needs, you might pick one or the other. Let's get into it. The first reason to go for the Panasonic S9 over the S5 Mark II is, of course, its compact design. This is a lot smaller than most micro four thirds cameras, which means you can easily fit it into your pocket. Now, I've got the small rig grip on there right now, and this allows me to get a little bit of extra purchase thanks to this little bit here, but it doesn't come with it by standard. So this is actually quite a bit smaller and lighter than it would be with this little grip on, which makes it a great little travel camera. I can pull it out of my pocket whenever I need to, take some photos, take some high quality video all the way up to 6K, making it the perfect little travel camera. This is definitely my go-to anytime I don't need unlimited recording, or if I'm in a situation where I just want to take some travel photos. It's a really great choice. Pairing this camera with the 20 to 60mm kit lens allows me to get some really great results. This will kind of tie into the next point I'm going to talk about in just a moment, but you can see just how small and light this is. And again, if you don't want to use this grip, you don't have to, which will reduce the weight even further. The second reason to go for the S9 over the Panasonic S5 Mark II is the hybrid zoom feature, which we only find in the S9. So this is a really great feature. It allows me to take this 20 to 60mm kit lens. If I'm shooting in HD, I can punch all the way in, instead of 60mm, all the way to 186mm. So it makes this 20 to 60mm lens almost a telephoto lens, which is insane. Hybrid zoom also works in 4K, which allows this 60mm focal length on the tight end to reach 93mm, which is still quite a lot further in than where we started. Again, this is just from having the same zoom lens on the Panasonic S9. The third reason to go for the S9 over the S5 Mark II is we get PDAF in more modes. So we can shoot in S&Q mode all the way up to 1080p at 100 frames per second and get full phase detection, autofocus, or what Panasonic calls phase hybrid. On the S5 Mark II, it defaults back to contrast DFD, which is a huge kick in the guts. Same when you're shooting at HD 50 or 60 frames per second in the regular recording menu. This gives us phase detection, autofocus, whereas the S5 Mark II doesn't. I've mentioned this on a prior video. It's one of those updates I think every S5 Mark II owner would love to see come to that particular camera. So drop a comment if you want to see that on your S5 Mark II. But as it stands right now, this actually gives us better autofocus performance, which is crazy. Reason 4 to get the S9 over the S5 Mark II is it's the cheapest option for 6K open gate recording with a full frame sensor, which makes it a really great deal. Whether you're shooting for social media purposes or whether you're using this camera with an anamorphic lens, you can get so much resolution and information out of this camera. And it's currently $300 less expensive than the S5 Mark II on B&H at the time of filming. And while this isn't a cheap camera, I'll put that in quotations, it's definitely more affordable, which will appeal to people on a budget who might not need to let the camera run all day, but want to take full advantage of that open gate recording. While both cameras support real-time LUT, the win definitely goes to the S9 just in terms of its integration with the LUMIX Lab app. Now, I would expect Panasonic to update the S5 Mark II and X at some point to have the same functionality, but it's kind of part of the fun of this camera. So there's a big LUT button on the back. It allows us to get into that particular LUT loader option and pick the LUT that we like, and we can store up to 30 on this as opposed to the 10 or so we can store on the S5 Mark II. So the win here definitely goes to the S9. And the way that this connects to the app, we can preview those LUTs ahead of time, and this will be all functionality that trickles down at some point to the S5 Mark II. But as of right now, the real-time LUT feature definitely gets the win on the S9. Now, if you're shooting for social media, the S9 definitely gets the win. I can bypass the need for a computer, which is fantastic. So I can shoot in the new MP4 Lite codec on this if I'm shooting video, transfer that wirelessly to my phone, crop it vertically, crop it square, however I like, and then deliver it straight from my phone to Instagram or TikTok. I don't really use TikTok, but if I need it for Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, I can upload them directly from the phone, which makes that whole process a lot easier. So if you're a social content creator, this definitely gets the win. Before we talk about why you should get the S5 Mark II over the S9, I just want to talk about why this is such a great camera. It takes great photos, it takes great video. It's small, it's light, it's compact, and if I'm traveling overseas and I want just a general purpose photography and video camera, I'm taking this. It's great. It's just an awesome camera that I can fit into my pocket. I really like it. Now, its functionality is limited when it comes to its video recording mode, so it does have some recording restrictions. It doesn't have a mechanical shutter for photography, but I didn't even realize it didn't have a mechanical shutter until a few days into using it, and it didn't bother me because I'm not a serious photographer. If you're someone who's used to shooting with a mechanical shutter, or you've got 20 years of experience in the field, this isn't designed for you. It's designed for someone who wants a less expensive full-frame camera that's designed for social media purposes, and that's where this really shines. I know in some countries, even in Australia, the price on this might seem more expensive, but it's still less than what the S5 Mark II was at launch, so keep that in mind. And if you're looking just for something that can be used for filmmaking or general purpose photography, this is an awesome camera. All right, over to the Panasonic S5 Mark II. I'm gonna give you 7 reasons why you should purchase this over the S9, and then at the end, I'm gonna give you some food for thought. So stick around, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell if you're new to the channel. If you're enjoying it so far, leave a thumbs up, it really helps. Let us know in the comment section which one you like best and why, as these birds are very loud. Let's get into it. The first reason to go for the Panasonic S5 Mark II over the S9 is the active cooling fan, and this helps keep the camera cool in almost any shooting scenario. I've tested this out to about 39 degrees Celsius here in Melbourne, Australia over summer. In the sun, I've never seen a heat warning message or anything. The active cooling really works a treat. If you're in a situation where you need to let the camera run all day or even for a few hours at a time, this camera is definitely the one to go for. It also doesn't give us any recording restrictions either. So unlimited recording would be the second big reason, in combination with that active cooling. You can simply plonk this on a tripod, power it, and just let it run until the SD card fills up, or the dual SD card. So this is a really cool thing to have on a camera, whether you're shooting outside on a hot day, or if you're in a situation where you just need to let it run, the S5 Mark II definitely gets the win. The third reason to go for the S5 Mark II kind of ties into the unlimited recording and active cooling. This is another professional feature that really makes this camera stand out, and that's that we get 2 UHS 2 media card slots. If you're doing any type of client work, weddings, or anything important where getting a sense of redundancy is extremely important, the S5 Mark II makes the most sense. Now, technically speaking, the S9 can back up wirelessly to your phone, but I wouldn't consider that a professional feature whatsoever. This allows you to back up in every single mode on the fly in real time. You don't have to have your phone or tablet handy, so just being able to back up to a second SD card definitely gives this camera the win. We get a mechanical shutter and more photography features on the S5 Mark II over the S9. Now, while the S9 can take awesome photos, and if you're an enthusiast, the mechanical shutter won't make a big difference, but if you're a professional and you need to get a mechanical shutter to make sure that you're shooting in certain scenarios where you won't see any type of banding or sort of rolling shutter artifacts, then this will definitely be the camera to go for. With that in mind though, I've never had a problem shooting photos with the S9 so far, but if you're a serious professional and you need that mechanical shutter, this camera definitely gets the win. Tying into the previous point, we get an electronic viewfinder, and this is especially helpful, again, if you're a serious photographer or if you just like to shoot video using an EVF. Unfortunately, the S9 doesn't have an EVF, but for content creation purposes and talking to the camera like this, I can see myself on the flippy screen, no problems whatsoever. But if you're behind the camera predominantly and you like to use an electronic viewfinder, the win here goes to the S5 Mark II. This next reason might not be a deal breaker for some, but I'm definitely going to mention it, and that's that we get an actual hot shoe on the S5 Mark II over no hot shoe on the S9. So the advantage of a hot shoe is if you ever like to use a flash, which I've never used personally, then you can absolutely use it with the S5 Mark II. But for me personally, it comes down to the audio adapters. So I can use the S5 Mark II with Panasonic's DMW XLR adapter. I can record using an SM7B microphone, a podcasting microphone, a shotgun microphone, or anything and get professional quality audio. This is something that won't be available for the LUMIX S9 at all because it doesn't actually have the terminals where the hot shoe is. So just keep that in mind. If you're thinking about getting one of these two cameras for a studio tool or any time where you need professional audio, the S5 Mark II makes a whole lot more sense. All right, the seventh and final reason is a bit of a big one, so I left this until last, and this will cover the overall ergonomics and shooting experience. Now, the S5 Mark II has a much bigger grip. It actually has a grip unlike the S9, so you do have to get that smaller grip to make the S9 a lot more comfortable in the hand. But if you've got large hands like me, this camera is so much more comfortable to use if you're working behind the camera predominantly. Now, if you're just going to be using it on a tripod, what's the difference, right? It makes no difference in that scenario, but this grip is by far one of my favorites on any camera. Both cameras share the same type of command dial, although this is larger and easier to see than on the S9. This over here will be the make or break for a lot of people, and this is the photographic command dial. So if you're a hybrid shooter and you like to take photos and switch modes nice and fast, This dial on the left makes that a whole lot easier. Additionally, if you're someone who likes to shoot in a studio, the win again goes to the S5 Mark II as we get a full-size HDMI port instead of a micro HDMI. I'm not holding this against the S9, being that it's as small and compact as it is, but again, if you're going to be running it out to an external monitor for many months, years, or however long you have the camera, this will be so much more reliable. The next advantage that this camera has over the S9 is we get a headphone output. Now, if you're just going to be shooting out in the field like this, you don't really need it, but if you're behind the camera shooting a show for someone else, that's where it's really handy to have a set of headphones on just to make sure the audio is all good. This is a feature that you won't find on the S9, but again, not everyone will need that, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And finally, here we get a USB-C port that can accept USB PD charging. Now, while both cameras can charge when they're off, you won't actually lose charge with the S5 Mark II. You can have just 1% battery and essentially turn it on using 9 volts, 3 amps, and let it run as long as you need. So the advantage here in terms of usability goes to the S5 Mark II. And this is, again, a professional body design, which gives it the advantage over the S9. All right, let's talk about which one to buy between the Panasonic S9 and the Panasonic S5 Mark II. I'm gonna break this down into a few different sections. So if you already have an S5 Mark II or an S5 Mark IIX, and you're looking for a more cost-effective B camera that can tie into your phone and social media a lot easier, then get the S9. It's a great B cam, and as long as you don't need unlimited recording on your second camera, this is a really great choice. The S5 Mark II is still my favorite of the two for my needs. Now, I do a lot of tutorial videos, I shoot out in the field a lot. Having active cooling and unlimited recording is an absolute no-brainer for me, which is why I ended up buying 4 Panasonic S5 Mark IIs. Now, if your budget can stretch for the S5 Mark II, this is the better long-term choice over the S9, with one exception. For those who plan on doing any type of travel, or if you're doing any type of filmmaking where you don't need to let the camera record all day, if 10 or 15 minutes is enough recording time at a time, this is definitely the way to go, especially if you're just doing sort of reels for TikTok and all that. The open gate recording looks every bit as good on the S9 as it does on the S5 Mark II. I almost thought about buying a second one of these for my guitar walkthrough series. This is on my other channel, by the way. We get the same IBIS, the same great image quality, better autofocus, and it's smaller, which means if I put 2 of these in a bag on a plane, it's going to be smaller and lighter than 2 of these on a bag on a plane. So yeah, there's definitely some advantages to the S9, but this is a specialty camera, and I think that got a little lost in translation when the initial reviews were out. People were complaining about what it didn't have. That's because this isn't aimed at someone who's been shooting photos for 20 years. It's for someone who's just getting into it, who doesn't care about a mechanical shutter, who will never use a flash. I never use a flash, so for me, it's not a deal breaker. You've got to pick the right camera for the job, and I think in terms of the best bang for buck, the S5 Mark II is still pretty hard to beat. Without any questions, this is still a really powerful camera, but the S9 is still right there when it comes to image quality, and being that we get better autofocus, especially in S&Q mode, makes this a great B camera or a primary camera if this is your only option. I really like this camera, and I think it got an unnecessarily hard time because people didn't understand who it was for. But it's a great little camera, so I could definitely use either of these interchangeably anytime I'm shooting short duration clips. But for long duration recordings, the win definitely goes to the Panasonic S5 Mark II. Thanks for watching.